everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, School Counselor Strategies, Enhancing Coping Skills for Tough Times. Thank you so much for those of you who are joining us live and for those of you who are watching the recording at a later time. We know all of you have busy schedules and we really appreciate you spending the next hour or so with us. For many people, the past couple of years have included immense change in what a typical day looks like and how and when we feel safe interacting with others and so much more. In this webinar, we are so fortunate to have the 2023 ASCA School Counselor of the Year, Meredith Draughn, and School Counseling Consultant and former state education leader from North Carolina, Cynthia Floyd, to discuss some of the implications of these changes for students and schools and share effective practices that school counselors can use to enhance students' skills and successfully navigate challenging times. My name is Jennifer Sanderlin, and I am an Education Partnerships Development Manager at Committee for Children. For anyone who's just listening today, I have medium-length blonde hair, black rimmed glasses, and I'm wearing a red sweater. I'll be one of your hosts for today's webinar. In my work, I get to support our team across the country to partner with and support schools, districts, nonprofit organizations, and state leaders in their work with social emotional learning, bullying prevention, and child protection. I am fortunate to have been in education for a little over 25 years now, and in fact, celebrating 10 of those years here at Committee for Children this last month. I'm joined today by my colleague and co-host, Wesley Draughn, who will say hello and introduce herself to kick things off today. Wesley?
Thank you, Jennifer. And as you said, I am Wesley Draughn. I have long blonde hair and I'm wearing a white turtleneck today for those of you who are just listening. I'm so glad to be a co-host with you and look forward to hearing what our wonderful guest speakers have to share with us. And in my work as an Education Partnerships Manager here at Committee for Children, over the last few years, I've worked with the Southeastern region of the United States. I get to work with medium to large school districts in several states, including North Carolina, where our speakers are both coming from today. And I'm currently in a graduate program for school counseling as well, so this is especially exciting for me. And first, I just kind of want to go over the agenda for today, so we'll get started with a quick look. We're going to do introductions and some welcome conversations, and then we're going to dive into our featured topic, School Counselor Strategies, Enhancing Coping Skills for Tough Times. And then we'll make sure that there's time for questions and answers and leave you with some resources at the end. Just a reminder for those of you who are just joining, we will provide a link to the recording, and you will also get a copy of the presentation slides along with a link to a certificate of attendance sometime next week. Quickly, I want to also introduce you to Committee for Children. For all of our newcomers to our webinars, a special welcome to you. Whether you are a repeat participant or a brand new, many of you know us by our research-based programs, Second Step, and don't always know that our family of programs are created by Committee for Children, a nonprofit organization based in Seattle, Washington since 1979, and our vision is to have our vision is for children to have safe and thriving and a just and peaceful world. With more than 40 years of work towards our mission to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional learning and development, we positively impact 24.4 million children each year in all 50 states and around the world. And we invite you to please explore more about Committee for Children, our advocacy work at the state and federal levels, and our commitment to equity and more by visiting our website at cfchildren.org. And then before we get started today too, I want to point out our commitment to equity as an organization. We are committed to recognizing, condemning, disrupting, and seeking to rectify systemic injustices that create barriers to children's success. And one of the first things we like to do is also point out that we are our offices reside on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, both past and present, specifically the first people of Seattle, Washington, the Draughn tribe. So we want to point out our commitment to equity in everything that we do. And now I'm going to hand it back over to the wonderful Jennifer.
Thank you, Wesley. So just as it relates to this webinar and in general, why would Committee for Children be so focused on school counselors in our work with social emotional learning skills, life skills, and prevention efforts? We love counselors first and foremost. They are the heart of a lot of the work we do. So that's the first thing. But counselors really have specialized training. You all who have joined us, we recognize that you have specialized training that is critical to help mitigate the stressors that students in school communities are facing right now. Many schools and districts that we work with, the social emotional learning efforts are led by counselors and counselor leaders. So we want to acknowledge and appreciate you for that and bring resources like having Meredith and Cynthia with us to help support you in that work. We definitely also have the pulse of what's going on in your entire schools, because you see all of the grade levels. Not every educator has that opportunity. It's a special opportunity, and we know that it's also a special responsibility. And the last thing is that counselors are often a support to teachers and other school staff as well. So we want to make sure that you are supported and acknowledged for doing that work too. We know that that's a lot to carry, especially when you yourselves are navigating these challenging times. So we'll leave you with some resources at the end too that might help with navigating some of those things for yourselves. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce one of our presenters today, Cynthia Floyd. She has 30 years of experience in education. So you've got a few on me, having served as a school counselor, state consultant for school counseling and student services, a district executive director of student support, and also as a state consultant again for school counseling. She led the revision of the North Carolina school counseling job description to be aligned with national best practices as defined in the ASCA school model. In addition to the other live and recorded professional development opportunities, she has provided countless training sessions. Maybe you've seen her out in your work across the state to support school districts and school counselors in the implementation of the job description, the professional standards, and the ASCA national model. So in between her two employments with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, she also served as the executive director for student services in a public school district, where she supervised and supported the effective implementation of student support services programs, school counseling, social work, school psychology, and school nursing, as well as intervention specialists. There is so much more we could say about Cynthia, but I better let her talk today so that we can learn from such an incredible speaker and mentor in the field. So welcome, Cynthia. We are so glad that you are here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. So nice to see you. Cynthia and I have been working together for quite a long time, so this is a fun thing for me. So as we get to hear from not one, but two amazing leaders, I also have the pleasure of introducing Meredith Draughn as well. As we mentioned, excitingly, Meredith is the 2023 American School Counseling Association School Counselor of the Year. Congratulations on that. She has 9 years of experience in school counseling, with experience at both elementary, middle, and high school levels. She received her bachelor's degree from Wake Forest University in Health and Exercise Science and her master's degree from Appalachian State University Professional School Counseling. Meredith is a national board certified school counselor and is an ASCA School Counseling Leadership Specialist, mental health specialist, anxiety and stress management specialist, cultural competency specialist, and diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. That is a lot of specialization to do. Oh my goodness. She's currently the sole counselor at the Everett Jordan Elementary School, which actually earned its ramp, which is the recognized ASCA School Model Program. You all know what that ramp is, and recognition that happened in 2021, which is for American School Counseling Programs. So thank you for being here, Meredith. Again, a lot more we could say about you, and really congratulations again on your appointment as the School Counselor of the Year. It's quite an accomplishment, and I'm sure you're extremely busy with all of the activities with ASCA School Counseling Appreciation Week last week. It's so exciting that you could join us. School Counselors Strong, as you can see in their backgrounds. We believe that too, and we want to thank you for that work. So happy that you're here and grateful to all that you can share with our audience.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. So with that, I think it's time that we let y'all share your screen and take it away. So let me pass the baton over to you, Cynthia, and you can share. There we go.
Okay, well then let's get started talking about these strategies. First thing we want to do is kind of have a little welcome and inclusion activity. Technically, COVID is still around, but when we think about how this has impacted your work as school counselors or district leaders in school counseling, when you think about that, what do you feel is the most difficult challenge for school counselors working with students now with the impacts of COVID? So if you could enter in the chat, what do you think are some of the most difficult challenges for you as school counselors and working with students from the impact of COVID? I'm going to see if I can drag the chat out so I can see this. The chat is not showing up for me, so I'm going to ask Jen or someone to maybe read a few examples from the chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, our chat, for whatever reason, I've seen it sometimes where you can show it for everyone, but for whatever reason, it doesn't show for everyone. I don't know if you all have that drop down. You're welcome to use it if it's there. So let me see what I can find. How to make my chat bigger so I can see. All right. So what are some of the challenges? Come back. Technology challenges, I see. Some big behavior concerns as one of the things I'm seeing. My chat won't seem to expand. Wesley, are you able to see that right now? For goodness
I have to dive in. Leah said anxiety and stress. Samantha said increase of behaviors and lack of social skills. Anna said the delay all the students seem to be having. That's what we have so far. Others thinking that students should be over the impact.
So thank you. I'm noticing some of these are popping up in the upper right hand of the screen. So we might be seeing them. Everyone might be seeing them as they pop up in the upper right.
Yeah, perhaps. Lack of social skills, I'm seeing that coming through. Isolation, withdrawal, dependency on technology. Let's see. As supports disappear, we have a large number of families facing the end of the housing/rental support. Ooh, yeah, an extra
stability being pulled out. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Come April, there'll be a lot of homeless families in my area, state with the lowest available housing. Oh dear. Yeah.
Thank y'all for sharing those and continue to share, because I know Committee for Children gets this chat as well. Really wanted to visit that because, as you know, as school counselors, you already had a lot of challenges. Students already had a lot of challenges, and you were working with so much before, and now we've got this in addition to that. And it's kind of pulled the rug out from under not just our students, but our schools and so many challenges. And we're glad to be with you today to try to share some strategies that can help you with working with these students. So as we think about the implications this has meant for our schools, you probably know how we got here. Basically, around March 2020, our schools shut down. Pandemic was declared. Later in March of that year, the CARES Act gave us some additional funding to try to help our students and the schools and families, and some of the nutrition rules got eased so that we could get food to children in some of the most amazing creative ways. We saw our nutrition staff getting food to students. And April, we found ourselves being lifted from the required testing, and so much changed so rapidly. And then over the summer, we're like still working hard to try to figure out what to do for the children and their families. And then come next school year, are we even going back to school? So much was thrown up in the air, and you all have lived this, so you know what I'm talking about. And we soon found out as we attempted to open school the following school year that normal no longer existed, not just for 2020, but through 2021 and 2022. And today, what we call normal does not look like it did before 2020. School personnel, children, families have all struggled what we know was happening throughout this was extreme stress, adversity, trauma for everyone. And I've heard frequently people saying we were all in the same storm, but we were not all in the same boat. And you all are supporting those children, regardless of which boat they're coming to you in. You have so much on you to support these children. If you're familiar with adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and I know as counselors you probably are, nearly all, if not all, of our families just experienced an ACE. We all went through an ACE. And what we're finding is, students and staff may be back at school after 3 disrupted years, but a return to the classrooms has not brought a return to normalcy. Recent results from the National Assessment of Educational Progress showed historic declines in American students' knowledge and skills, and widening gaps between the highest and lowest scoring students. The first annual State of the American Student Report synthesizes nearly 3 years of research on the academic, mental health, and other impacts of the pandemic and school closures. So if you look at this slide, it talks about how students lost critical opportunities to learn and thrive, losing all those months of learning and suffering from that increased anxiety and depression. As counselors, some of these children were coming to school because it was their safe space. And then they were at home in places that weren't always safe. More than 1 in 360 U.S. children lost a parent or caregiver to COVID-19. And these children are in your schools as well. They've lost someone dear to them to what they saw as an uncontrollable illness, yet we're expecting them to sit quietly in a seat and learn. And that barrier is not always easy to lift. And many of our students with disabilities or lack of internet access were almost completely cut off from essential school and life services. So this deeply traumatic period threatens to reverberate for decades, because this wasn't just a week, this was 3 years. And the academic, social, and mental health needs are real. They are measurable at this point, and they have to be addressed. And they have to be addressed quickly to avoid long-term consequences to individual students and our future workforce in our society. And you all are key people in helping make that happen. And before I leave this slide, I wanted to mention that some of these slides will have hyperlinks at the bottom, whereas if you want additional information on what is being shared on that slide, once you get these slides, you can go to those hyperlinks for that complete report and some additional information. And I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold, and I was telling Jen before we started, I never thought I'd see the day I'd be happy to have a cold, because it's not COVID. So we can all relate to that as well, I think. But thinking a little bit more about the state of the American child now, we have to acknowledge that what we know at this point is incomplete. Since the pandemic closures and following recovery have been so unprecedented in recent times, it's really too soon for us to tell what the long-term impact is going to be. And as you well know, COVID is not the only thing impacting students and staff wellness. It's possible that as we continue to dig into evidence on the pandemic's impact, some students, groups, or subjects may have not been so adversely affected as others. Again, same storm, different boat. Alternatively, the situation could be significantly worse than the early data suggests. We just don't know yet. Some students are already bouncing back pretty quickly. A lot of that is due to your support. But for some, the impact could potentially grow worse over time. We think about, what learning impact is this on tested subjects? We see the learning loss on the tested subjects. What about the non-tested subjects? What about the science and the history that's not getting measured as well? What about the impact on the current learning loss on their ability to grasp future material? When we think about how math and subjects like that, they build on the knowledge from year to year. So how does this impact their future learning of math or other subjects like that when they had such a weak foundation potentially through COVID? So, and then the cumulative effects on career and college readiness, especially for students that were in high school at the time. This could have completely changed their plans for going to college or what career. It elevated their rates of chronic absenteeism. Was a student disconnected? What are our dropout rates going to look like? Failing high school tests that they needed to get into college. So even that career and college readiness and the social and emotional impacts. We were not face-to-face for long periods of time. You think about your kindergartners, they started school without even know what it was like to go into a school building and be face-to-face with people, and learn appropriate relationship skills and self-regulation and just some of the most simple, appropriate classroom behavior. And of course, that ties into the mental health impacts on students and staff. And it's really too soon to see how long-term that's going to be. And one of you commented on people are expecting students to already be over this. This was too big for too long for students to already be over this. And that we're so fortunate that school counselors like you are there to help them through this critical learning time, critical ages for those coping skills. And when we think about mental health, the last point that was made on that previous slide, the positive and negatives of our lives affect mental health. When it comes to mental health, everyone has it. It's like physical health. It's not just mental illness. It's mentally healthy and physically healthy and mentally ill and physically ill. There's a continuum in between those two ends as well. And we all fall somewhere along this mental health continuum. And so do our students. And mental health can fluctuate from day to day as our stressors also change. For example, you'll see on the bottom of the screen a physical health example. With colds and viruses, we've definitely experienced that recently. So on the green end, there's someone healthy, and we teach our students to wash their hands and cover their mouths, to eat, when they cough, and to eat healthy, to try to prevent catching or spreading colds or viruses or germs. And we teach them things to do to help them stay healthy. And we move across the continuum. Yes, if a student starts showing symptoms like runny nose or sneezing, we're coming into the spring. It might just be hay fever. But if they continue to get worse symptoms, increasing coughing and fever, they're probably going to get a COVID test, and we're probably going to go to a doctor's office. We're going to get additional care because their physical health needs are increasing. And if it continues to increase and there's difficulty breathing and high fever, we're going to get additional physical health care because they're showing symptoms that need more care. And it's the same for mental health. Mental health is, how often do we teach our students how to stay mentally healthy? But there are things that stress out our mental health as well. So our goal is to maximize the numbers of students and children who fall in the green healthy zone. And in order to do this, it's essential that we dedicate time and energy and resources to prevention and education and awareness, so that just as we teach students to eat well, wash their hands, cover their mouths when they sneeze or cough, we need to teach them emotional health skills that promote interpersonal skills, self-regulation, safe school climates. School counselors are key in this with prevention and early intervention activities that are so much a vital part of this, so that we don't have our students ending up in that red end where they're suffering from mental illness, that we're also teaching them skills at an early age to be able to maintain healthy mental health as well. This quote comes from Charles Schneider, and it relates to mental health a lot, because we want to focus on some strategies today that can help students overcome the adversity they have and are still going through. And that comes down to hope. And Charles Schneider was big behind solution-focused counseling. As dismal as COVID was and other stressors have been, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. Hope is the belief in that better tomorrow. Goal setting is the cornerstone of hope. He also says that hope without action is merely a wish. So you as school counselors play key roles in that hope as you set goals for your support programs and student well-being, and you help students develop skills and help them achieve goals that they have. So what we're wanting to do today is help share some strategies with you to help get there. This image that you see on the right is from Dr. Trish Hatch, Hatching Results. You've probably heard of MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Supports. She came up with MTMDSS for school counseling, so multi-tiered, multi-dimensional, because we're working with the academic, the career, the social, emotional, mental health, all of that. And some of the strategies that you can implement can be done with all students. Universal core, that's that first tier. You might be doing, your district might have a core curriculum, such as Second Step. Jen mentioned Second Step earlier. You might be doing that across your school or some other curriculum. You might be doing individual student planning, helping kids select courses, things that you're doing with all students, that universal core. And think about who you can partner with for this. As we talk about these strategies, think as well about, are there teachers that do get what you do or do get the importance of social emotional wellness and are willing to support that you might can partner? You might be able to do some school-wide activities. Or if you have a school social worker, school psychologist that comes to your school, are there things you can partner with them to do as well? Possibly integrating something social emotional wellness related into the curriculum. You can do a writing assignment on it in their English language arts class or a poster in arts, various ways, even looking at the economic side of it in their math classes. So think about how you might partner with others to do this and get staff involved. You might like Stomp Out Bullying week or day, Unity Day, week, Random Acts of Kindness Day and week is coming up. Having daily promotion of character awareness, things like this, the things you can do for all students. Then the next tier or layer of this is targeted interventions that are identified for select students. So some students are going to need a little bit of supplemental service. They might not get everything from that school-wide or classroom-wide things you're doing. This goes beyond the universal core for students that might need a little bit of individual counseling or some small group counseling. Solution-focused counseling is great at this level. If you're not familiar with that, do seek some information out on solution-focused counseling. ASCA has some great recorded webinars on that. Another example, especially right now with what they're dealing with, could be helping students develop a stress management plan, and this is hyperlinked on this slide. So having them, teaching them how to recognize what triggers their stress, identifying the trigger, how to avoid stress and respond to stress. Mindful strategies and things like that. And if you're thinking that's just for those middle and high school kids, no, this can be learned at any grade level. I will never forget the time I visited an elementary school in Buncombe County, North Carolina. And I can't remember if it was second or third grade students that were doing, like a group, pretty much the classroom with the school counselor, and she was reading a book. And in the story, the character was getting really stressed out and anxious. And she asked all the kids, they're all sitting in front of her, what is happening? And all these little thumbs go up saying, she's getting stressed out. She's anxious. And I'm like, in the world? And what should she do? And all these little bitty kids put their hands on their chest and started doing slow breathing exercises. So this is something we could teach at any age. And for those of you that have probably used the strategy, they held their thumbs up because that's the size of the amygdala. They said, her amygdala is getting stressed. I'm like, I did not know the word amygdala at that age. So all ages can learn these strategies and make a personal stress plan. Of course, if you're working with really young kids, you're going to have to really make this simplified. Older kids, you can probably use the one that's at the website. But that's just one example of what you might do as supplemental for those students needing a little bit of extra support. And then that next tier, that top part, is something that school counselors aren't going to do quite as much of. You provide crisis counseling, short-term individual counseling, On the Trish Hatch's diagram, you see individual counseling just at the top, but there is some individual counseling that you also do at just the supplemental level. The individual counseling that's in the more intensive level is you might be doing about 4, 5 consecutive sessions with a student. When you get to the point that you're seeing it's going to need more than about 4 to 6 counseling sessions, that's when they need to be referred to another intensive therapy provider. Not that you can't do it, but when you have 400 and 500 students and you have to meet the needs of all of them, it's just impossible to do long-term therapy with a select few. So I don't want to take up too much of your time because I want to be sure that Meredith, our school counselor of the year, I'm proud to know her. She truly has done so much more than Jen was able to share with you. And I want to turn it over to her to make sure she has plenty of time to share with you some really good, effective strategies for school counseling. So Meredith, take it away.
Yeah, so I was asked to kind of share a little bit about what this kind of looks like in my program since COVID. And a lot of the stuff we actually had already implemented pre-COVID. We are a Title I school in a rural district. And so we have about, I think we're at like 75% free and reduced lunch. And so a lot of our students have experienced trauma. And I realized that when I came in and started kind of figuring out how do I help them, right? In all of these high numbers, I can't serve just 5% of them because more than 5% of them have experienced trauma, which is where we're at now after the pandemic, right? There's been this collective trauma. And so I feel like I sort of had a jump on the response because just in the location that I'm in the school that I'm in. But it's funny that Cynthia mentioned the hand, because that's exactly what we teach. We teach the hand model. You have to give kids visuals. I will say that I did this with high schoolers as well. And so I think that sometimes I get feedback on some of these strategies that is like, wow, this is like great for elementary, right? But I think what you're missing is high school kids are just elementary babies in big bodies, right? And so, you know, we are humans at the end of the day. And a lot of this has a lot of science behind it. And so basically we teach kids what happens when we flip our lid. And so when we have kids who have experienced some sort of trauma, or when we've lost some of those skills, you know, their lid is flipped, right? So this is that amygdala. Usually in a normal setting, we have a fist, we're able to learn, yay us, right? Something happens and we flip our lid and that amygdala is exposed. And as it gets exposed more, it grows, right? And so our fight or flight response, which I think is on the a few slides forward, but our fight or fight response is triggered, right? And that changes our brain structure. You're good, Cynthia. That changes our brain structure if you want to flip to the model of the brain. And this is what that might look like in a school. And I'm sure you can think already of 10 kids, right? That this attributes to. So attention, threat response, memory, self-awareness, integration, altered states of arousal, and timekeeping. I think it was easy before the pandemic to say, well, that kid's just lazy, right? Or that kid's just late. Not that kid is in a freeze response because of trauma. But now we have so many kids who are apathetic, right? Or could be labeled as lazy, or could be labeled as late all the time or tardy. And luckily there's a lot more coming out of that's a trauma response. Right? That is our brain on trauma. And so how we focus more on danger than daily life, how we focus on the unknown, those types of things, and how our back brains start to dominate our cortex, which is our thinking brain. Because for so long, our kids were in a state of not knowing what was going to happen, not having any control over what happened. And their brain adjusted accordingly, right? And so if you flip one more, Cynthia, this is all the brain I'm going to talk about. I love it. I love brain science. And I think that it helps me to make sense of what I'm doing on a daily basis. But if you look here, this is what the window of tolerance is. So we have our comfort zone, emotionally regulated, ability to self-soothe. I hope that you all have a place or a time or a feeling that you can think that's when I'm in my comfort zone, right? Like that gets me in there pretty quickly. But we also have other windows, like fight or flight, which is hyper aroused. That's when you see some of that anxiety, overwhelmed, those chaotic responses or outbursts, anger, aggression, rage, rigidness, obsessive compulsive. That is where, I think there's a doctor who did a TED talk who talks about the bear in the woods, right? And our brain and our body have this natural response where if we see the bear in the wood, we're running, right? Like we're gone. We don't even have to think like, oh, there's a bear, I should run. We're just going. The issue is what trauma can cause and what the fear of the unknown could cause is we see that bear everywhere, not just in the woods. And so if we stay there too long, that can be a problem. Same with the freeze response. I see this a lot with some high schoolers and middle schoolers. The disassociation or the not being present, the shutdown, the memory loss or disconnected, like their brain is not able to take in that information because of that level of tolerance is not where it needs to be. Right. And so that cause is fear, trauma related. Again, these kids who thought they were headed towards a normal high school experience or a normal middle school experience, which what is a normal middle school experience, right? Unclear, but at least the abnormal middle school experience. And then they kind of got the rug ripped out from under them. And now they don't know what is what. And so helping kids get back into their comfort zone, helping kids help themselves, right, has been a big part of my program the last few years. And, I've had to really prioritize that over some of our other domains because I'm a firm believer that it's Maslow's before Bloom, right? Like if you don't have your basic needs met, there's that higher learning is not coming. And so making sure that we are helping kids stay in that regulated zone is a big part of my program. And so this is one of my favorite quotes by L.R. Knost. It says, when little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm and not to join their chaos. And so ultimately, the game plan that I took from COVID is helping students build self-regulation back into their daily life. And that looks like building their frustration tolerance. I don't know how many of y'all you're good, Cynthia, you can leave it there. I don't know how many of y'all had like lessons, right? Or you would pop in and you would see videos off or kids just totally disconnect, right? Just shut that computer because they did not have to engage with hard things. They had the option not to do that. And that became a habit. They got used to it. And that is not a habit in real life. That is not a habit when you are talking to someone that you disagree with face to face. You can't just turn and run away. I mean, you can, right? But it's not super socially acceptable. And so when you're in the classroom, you can't just shut your computer and claim that you're done with work and go play video games the rest of the day. That's not possible. You have to build back that frustration tolerance. And so that is something that we have really worked to do here at the Everett Jordan. And it has been tough. There's, a lot of our kids have really thrived in doing that. And we've seen some great progress in learning. And of course, as Cynthia was talking about those tiers, there's some kids who haven't, and that's okay, right? Everyone's at a different place. Everyone had a different experience and everyone's going to have a different response. And so I want to point out though what self-regulation is, because I get some pushback when I speak with teachers about it sometimes. Not my teachers, they are excellent, but some teachers who are like, well, what does this look like, right? So the ability to understand and manage your own behavior and reactions, helpful in controlling impulses and focusing on tasks, which we all need to do that, right? And then able to be taught by connecting thoughts and feelings through skill, practice, and modeling. So self-regulation, just as Cynthia was talking about, I can't believe those kindergartners do it. Well, I can because we teach it. It is a learned behavior. And you can learn really not great self-regulation, right? Or you can learn proper self-regulation. And so it's all about their environment that they're in. And so we have to work to teach that and build that up. And really want to point out what self-regulation is not. Adults calming a student down. And if the student is not leading the regulation, it's not self-regulation, it's co-regulation. And that's not a bad thing, right? Because co-regulation can lead to that. But if you are constantly being called on your walkie to run down and help a kid every single day, right, who is dysregulated and is having some big behaviors, might want to look at building that into your program, because it's not you calming that student down. That is co-regulation, and they're not necessarily having to learn or build any of that together. And so that is something that I'm going to show you how I addressed, because I found myself doing a lot of that after the pandemic. And I am but one person, right? I am the only counselor in my school. I have 358 kids. I cannot walkie-talkie call all of them all day long. It's just not feasible. And so I had to kind of go upstream a little bit and look at it at a broader spectrum. And so the way that I did that was in teaching self-regulation. It's the same as you would teach math or reading or anything else, right? The teaching model of teaching it, practicing it, applying it, processing it, and then you start over, right? So it's cyclical, and you might be like, oh, they got it out on step 4. Probably not. They might have that one skill, right, for that one feeling, but it's very cyclical, and you're constantly learning. I would encourage you to think about your own self-regulation, right? Are there times that even as an adult, you're like, ooh, probably could have handled that better, right? You're processing that, and then you're going to kind of reteach yourself some different ways to handle it. If that happens with us, it certainly is going to happen with children as well. In my MTSS program, we use these with core instruction, and check in and check out with break spots for success for different students at different places. So I'll show you a little bit about that just to give you some ideas. But first, things to consider as you're thinking about your own program. I want you to think about what is developmentally appropriate. So choosing strategies that are appropriate for your student's current level of ability. Just because you have a student who is in 12th grade does not mean they are at the 12th grade level of ability. So make sure that you are working at the level, of your students. And so I love how, there's always that one grade level, right? You're like, woo, 5th graders are really giving us a run for our money this year. So we might be putting some things in place or expect some things right now of 5th graders that are not developmentally appropriate for them because they just missed 2 years of normal education, right? So we might need to take a few steps back. And that's what we've had to do with several grade levels. So making sure that you're not just assuming because this is the developmental age that they're at right now, that's where we can work, making sure you're digging in a little bit more to that. Knowing that all kids are unique with their own strengths and weaknesses, and have unique emotional regulation needs. I love emotional regulation. I love the brain of all this. I could go for days about whether it's sensory seeking or attention seeking or, avoidance or tangible, all those good things, but making sure that you're matching the regulation skill with their need. And so, for example, turn on loud music, see who goes like this, right? And see who starts kind of bumping along. That's going to give you sensory seeking versus sensory avoidant when it comes to auditory processing. Okay. So what I do is I would love to have time to sit down with all 368 or 58 of my children and go independently through and make a personalized plan. But unfortunately, the time is not necessarily there for that in our tier program. And so I do it in classroom lessons at the beginning of the year. We have a selection of all types of sensory skills, coping skills. There's chewing gum for some, there's loud music, there's soft music, there's comforting music, there's silence, noise canceling headphones, right? There's journaling, all kinds of different things they can try out. So we just have like a buffet of coping skills, and they can go through in like a little scoot manner and see, and they just check off. Do I like it? Did it work for me? No, it didn't. I didn't really love this. Okay, we're going to move along. And then we kind of have a little game plan to work with. And that's just one 45-minute classroom lesson that I'm able to do with students at the beginning of the year to give me a starting point if they do start to struggle, right? But I also always look at, I can skip down developmental stages, but I can't skip up. So I can't expect something of a second grader that I would expect of a fifth grader, right? But a fifth grader might be working at that second grade level. When that happens with reading or writing, we give them extra support, right? We're not like, what is wrong with you, right? It's a, woo, like what happened? There must be a learning gap there. How can we fill that in? So making sure you're looking at developmentally appropriate. And then what is functionally appropriate? You need to implement things that are functional in the setting that students actually have an issue in. Is it school? Is it home? Is it during electives? If it's only during music class, why? Right? So be curious is what I would say about functionally appropriate supports and strategies when you're looking, like instead of just being, oh, this kid is like struggling with music every single day. I'm going to ask questions, right? I'm going to take that from a lens of curiousness and say, what is it about music that's hard for you? What do you, or ask that teacher, what do you see right before the behavior, right? What's happening right before? And then is it right before lunch? Are we hungry, right? That's a real thing with our kids these days because they were able to get a snack at any time during the day. That's one thing I heard from parents was, y'all got to get back in school because my grocery budget has tripled, right? But they were able to get a snack at any time. And now we have kind of specific times for food. So is it that type of need? Making sure, looking at different transitions. You can look at all different things to make sure that it's functionally appropriate. But like if they're singing in music class, gum is probably not appropriate, right? For an oral sensation. You might need to look at something different. So making sure that it's a strategy that you can tolerate, that your teacher can tolerate, and that actually is working for the student. My favorite quote that I get sometimes is, but it didn't calm them down. And then they just got angrier when I redirected them back to work, right? Because that is what we are all about. We are all about working. We are all about growing that learning loss and recovering from that. It is going to take time, right? It is not a one fix all. I always remind teachers that if a kid used a calculator wrong, you wouldn't just rip the calculator away from them. You would reteach them how to use the calculator. So if they're using a tool, we might need to look and make sure that the tool is correct. The calculator has batteries, right? And we might need to reteach, reapply, reprocess, all the things. But I think the biggest thing is if we are going to help our kids rebound from this, we're going to have to learn to first teach them to advocate for what they need, to ask for what they need, and then we have to learn to believe them. I think we talk a lot about what kids need, and we forget to ask kids what they need. What does that look like? And so making sure that we are letting them in on it and hearing their experience, because in my experience, not a lot of people have cared about their experience. So it has taken some time to kind of get their opinion back, right? But making sure we're giving them some alternatives, giving their voice a little more power, and giving them that buy-in to that strategy, right? We're not just telling them what to do. We're working through the process with them. I think a lot of times we're like, well, they didn't do their homework because they were taking a break, or they didn't do this because they were trying to use a self-regulation strategy, or a behavior came. The work is still happening, right? It still goes home. There's still a viable option to do it. It's just at an alternative time. So I'm not saying like, don't hold kids to high expectations. I think we can still hold kids to high expectations and like help them do hard things so that they don't have to do them alone, right? That's school counseling 101. And so, ultimately you can try to force as much as you want, but if they're in a flipped or a flooded brain, they're not going to be able to return to work. Learning has ceased for that time. And so we need to return them to a place where they can work. And adults are the best example of this. If you've ever received some news or thought of something that was really upsetting during your workday, how much work did you get done after that? I would assume not a lot, right? And yet we have kids coming in with all sorts of stuff the night before, the morning of, on the bus ride over, right? And we're like, get to work. Here we go. It's time to start our day, right? So I think being cognizant of that and realizing that ideally we need to focus on it as a skill issue and not a will issue. It's not that they don't want to, it's that maybe they can't right now. And so how can we turn the can't to not yet, right? Or the can't to I can with some support, those types of things. So the support that I give, I'm going to go through that really quickly because I know we're moving on time, but core strategies. All of these are taught in core classroom lessons, assemblies, or by the teacher. I teach my teachers at staff meetings or faculty meetings, and they teach the kids, right? Still a core strategy. Not only that, teachers are bought into that strategy because they are also learning it. You can practice when they are practicing all other school expectations. My administration is phenomenal, and we do not teach any content the first 2 weeks of school or the first week back from a break. We only do behavior expectations. And so that is a great time for them to learn those and focus on that only. And then you just add this right on in there, right? So students apply in the classroom as needed. So my PTO is really great. They helped me to get funds to just a little pencil box. And it's take a break to feel calm. So it's how are you feeling and what can you do about it, right? How can we help you to get back to regulated? So there's little manipulatives in there that kind of go through all the senses. I have little just like orange earplugs that you can get at like a hunting store for, I don't know, there's like 1,000 in each pack, right? For $20. They don't work great for like actually drowning out all noise, but that's not what we want in a school setting, right? They still need to hear teacher instruction. It's just the extra noise that can really kind of get to some kids. So they have some of those. Those are in every classroom, and I've explicitly taught kids how to use them. We've practiced, we've, applied, processed, retaught, all the things. So that was a really cool thing that we had in place, even before the pandemic, but coming back has been used pretty much daily by multiple students every day, depending on what their day looks like, right? I will also say that K-12, I would say K-Life, people learn through play. People learn through playing. And so I love that. So ways that you can help teach kids these skills, and teach them to be in charge of their own regulation, to be in charge of their own brain, something that they can control. Games. So Jenga, freeze, Simon Says, all the things, right? If you're working on things like following directions, kids are struggling to follow directions. Twister is always a great one, right? But I love Simon Says for following directions, self-control, all the things. If you have interrupters, people who just want to share everything and all the time because they've been on mute for the last 2 years, a share journal. Okay. They can write in it to their heart's content all week long. And then you have one time that week that they share it with their helping adult. Could be a teacher. A lot of times for us, it's a specialty teacher or a TA that they have a really good relationship with and want to share stuff with. And instead of going out of class to talk to that person, they get 1 10-minute time to just share their journal with them. Literature. So books, again, it's a lot easier to teach things at whatever level through someone else. So this is true with adults too, right? We might watch a TV show and learn something from that person's experience because it's not as personal to us. So it's not as hard. It's not as high risk. Kids are the same way. Any kind of literature that you can do are great. Visuals, these are for high school kids too. Don't stop being a visual learner just because you turn 12, right? That doesn't stop. And so making sure that we're putting it visual, potentially auditory, and any kind of hands-on learning that we can add with it, really that triad is going to be the most effective. Role play examples are my actual favorite. If you've ever made a middle schooler role play, it is just truly the most fun. But this takes a lot of coaching, right? So maybe recruit some other helping adults if you have a group or a lunch bunch or something that you're using role play examples with of how we might make it through a tough situation or what could have happened during the pandemic and how they might have handled it, right? Or what happens when we're all like really struggling with a certain topic in class. Do we just scream out and start talking? Do we leave the classroom? No, there are ways that we can get around that, right? Adding SMART goals for SEL. I think we have a lot of goals for academics now, but not so much for social emotional. And it took a learning loss just like everything else. Okay, so setting some goals, celebrating those little victories. We had one kid who had to be removed from class for his own safety, like 7 times one week. We did a quick little intervention, made some break cards for him, and the next week he only had to be removed once. That's huge, right? That brought us back 6 times. So we celebrated that with them. Teaching and tracking positive habits, whether that's through check in and check out, a little goal sheet, a check sheet for some of our older kids, teaching kids to make a list, teaching kids to set a goal and set a habit and check that off. It feels very elementary, but it actually is very much necessary in our older students as well. Mindful and movement breaks. That anxiety and those worries that are coming through our body, we got to get that energy out some way, right? I love little strategy sticks. If kids, if you have like a student who comes in and sits in your office, I don't know, right? I don't know what to do. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what to try. Strategy sticks are your answer. Write some different self-regulation strategies or movement strategies or anything on a stick. Have them pick it out. This is what we're trying today, right? Do you like it? No, pick again. So it kind of gives that a little more structure, which is helpful. And then class break spot, which I've already talked about. So Cynthia, you can keep on. Again, this is just examples of how we use our space here. There are SEL strategies pretty much everywhere that we can just grab and go with. So you can flip through those. And you will get this presentation to really kind of dig in. Again, just explicit instruction for break boxes. A lot of people say, well, that doesn't really work. Have you really taught that, right? Processing sheets, you can keep on moving. Supplemental and tier 2 strategies. Cynthia already touched on a lot of this, so I'm going to do this kind of briefly as well. But teaching expectations in small groups for those who are struggling, any kids you can group together is helpful. And applying in the classroom is needed. That's teaching the teachers what you're helping the students with as well. I linked some little checklists down there, just little examples that you're welcome to take a look at. But you can also pair with individuals as well, which is intensive. This is student specific. So if it's intensive, if it's reached tier 3, it's 1 student. So applying in that break corner is needed. Making sure that you're looking at that sensory sheet that they filled out at the beginning and putting stuff in that break box that's going to work for them. This should not be a lot of kids. Out of 358, we have 2 kids who have a break spot individually. And so making sure if you have like a lot of kids doing this, you might need to look at your tier 2 or your core and kind of reteach some stuff there. There's a lot of words on this. I just wanted you to, like, after this presentation, to think about these things in your own building. So how are you modeling? How are you providing opportunities to practice? How are you monitoring and reinforcing these skills in your own building? And then don't forget, it starts with us, right? So you should teach those skills. Co-regulation is going to have to happen first, and that's okay. And ideally, it only has to happen with 15% of your students for a long term, right? Type thing, or a few weeks type thing. And then you kind of keep backing it up. So structuring your environment, having that warm, responsive relationship, making sure that we are leading the charge in the implementation of mental health. So I added on here a resource slide that I will also post. It's not on this one specifically, but just a few tips and tricks to take back. So, different like strategies that will be on there, and then a resource link that Cynthia will send to Jen, I believe, after this is over. And so that I want you to really dig into that yourself and see what would work in my building, what might not. But just to really get you thinking of, this is how it can look. This is how we have seen success in kind of helping kids to reintegrate back into the classroom.
Thank you so much. This was a whirlwind of so many great resources and tools and activities that you can do. But for those of you that are still here, we can take some of those questions. So if you have questions for either of our presenters today, please do put those in the chat box and we'll take a couple of those if we can. One of them is a question from Jennifer asking, when do you work with students? Do you pull them out of other classes? So it sounds like kind of a logistics question of how to get to working with students more individually.
Yeah, I do a lot of lunch bunches so that it's a social time anyways, which is when we're practicing social emotional skills, right? So I do a lot of that at lunch bunches in a group setting. And then individually also sometimes during lunch, but sometimes we have like an intervention block. And so I am able to pull at that specific time or just work with a teacher, their teacher for a specific 20 to 30 minutes that may be beneficial for them. Maybe during a time where they're already showing a strength or something like that. But yeah, just, that's kind of student specific. And I try to work with the teacher at what would be the best time for them. Elementary, it's a lot easier to pull than high school. I will say that. But high school lunches or any kind of like study period or anything would be the time that I used to work with them.
The question, I guess, as a follow-up is what activities do you do at lunch bunches?
Well, all kinds, right? We have all kinds of fun in lunch bunch. It depends on what the lunch bunch is for, right? So we just had a lunch bunch today. We're working on self-control. We have some friends who really struggle with keeping their bodies still and safe. So we ate our lunches. We talked about some different strategies of how we can show self-control. So our hands in our lap, our bodies are still. And then we practiced. So we played a little freeze dance. They had some music where they're able to wiggle, 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 wiggle. As soon as that music goes off, right, they have to use those listening skills to sit and use a strategy. That might be sitting on their hands. There might be hands in their lap. That might be, showing me the ready sign. But using a strategy that we had already learned, as long as they were showing me a strategy, they got a point, right? And masterfully, everyone got a point the whole time. So we all won and we all became winners of our lunch group for this week. But just little skill sessions like that, getting to know, each kid individually is important. And then sometimes during lunch bunch, other activities that we might do are some journaling or something like that. Just a little mindfulness, a time to kind of calm down and like kind of chill. If they've had a hard morning or had a hard day, if we notice the morning is more of a trigger, we will do like a mindful lunch bunch where it's a little calmer than our cafeteria, right? So it depends on the need of the student.
That makes sense. That also sounds really fun. I want us to do that at our lunch table someday if we're back in person. Oh, thank you so much, Meredith. I don't see any other questions in the chat box right now. So I think we will go ahead and wrap up our time together today. It has been such a wonderful whirlwind of tools and resources and information that I know the audience will get to take with them. All of the links, so handy. Thank you for doing this, but all of the links of different resources and research and things that both of our presenters put little links on their pages for their on the slides, which when it gets to you will be live links as well in the PDF. So you can dig in and take a look at some of those resources. We have a couple of resources to share with you too, just before you go, and I will pass it over to our lovely Wesley to show you a few of those.
Thank you. Before we end our time, we wanted to share those few resources that Jennifer was just mentioning. And one of those is a free resource from Committee for Children to help take care through this winter. Though we are coming closer to spring now, winter is often a tough time for people. So we have a lovely series of videos that can help educators, especially to take good care and learn some practices that can help them. There are topics like how to meet your baseline needs and build resilience, healthy ways to unwind, and giving yourself some grace. You can find those at the link on this slide here. And then, as we mentioned earlier, Committee for Children is best known for Second Step, for early learning, elementary, middle school, and those programs represent a holistic and child-centered approach to building more supportive communities for every child through social emotional learning, child protection, and bullying prevention. And as you can see in the graphic on this screen here, it also includes out of school time which is for K through 5, and our social emotional learning for adults, which is for our K through 12 educators. Excitingly, we also have a high school program in development as well. So if you'd like to learn more about any of our other programs, please visit our website, secondstep.org, or join us for another in-depth webinar. And then speaking of webinars, we do offer overviews each month, so to look at the research and design of our programs, as well as special topics just like this one. We also have a district leader series. It's once per month from now through June. It offers panel discussions with district leaders and community-based organizations across the United States on relevant topics for district leaders who are interested in social emotional learning in our Second Step programs. And then for anyone who is already using the Second Step programs or would like to engage with over 10,000 program users, educators, counselors, leaders, and others who are engaged with social emotional learning and other topics, please use the QR code on this slide and join our wonderful Facebook community. And then finally, whether you are a longtime program user or just beginning your exploration of social emotional learning resources, always feel free to reach out with your questions or your feedback. Our team of support professionals are happy to help answer your call, your email, and you can also visit the website to look into our help section for answers to many of your questions too. If you are a district or an organization leader managing multiple schools or sites, please reach out using our district consultation form, which is on the screen here, the link for that. And now I'm going to hand it right back over to Jennifer for some final thoughts.
Thank you, Wesley. I know that that was a whirlwind too, and I know that our presenters, when we talked before, just as a way to kind of end our time, for those of you who are still with us, thank you. If you're still with us, I would just love for you to sort of share maybe one thing you heard today that you will take with you into your work. If you can write those in the chat box, that always kind of helps the presenters to know what was resonating. It helps us to know what resonates and helps us at Committee for Children to know what kinds of things we can do to support you in your work. So I hope you heard at least one thing. I know there were hundreds of things in there. So I know too that when you write something down, whether it's clicking into a chat box and sharing it with others, or even just saying it to yourself, that it really sets the intention and stamps that in time, saying that you're gonna do those things. Even if you don't end up doing them in the near future, it will pop back into your mind. So I just want to put that out there. Your brain will attend to those things when you write them down or say them to someone else. So are there any last thoughts that you want to share, Cynthia or Meredith? I know you both shared so much.
Just a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you so much to Meredith for joining today as well.
It was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all of your expertise, your wisdom, your warmth. I just want to tell you how important it is to have leaders like you helping galvanize and uplift the work of school counselors and the counselor leaders. We just really appreciate you. And I want to just also, on behalf of Committee for Children and my co-host Wesley, we want to say thank you to all of you, our audience, for joining us today. And just as a little reminder to my second bullet on the slide is that if negative experiences can affect people in traumatic ways, then just remember that so can the positive experiences. And you are a big part of changing that trajectory. So we hope that this has been helpful, and I hope you'll take these things and do that and be a part of that big trajectory of positivity that I know this world is capable of, y'all. I know. So have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope we'll see you on another webinar really soon in the near future. Till then, take care, everybody. It's nice to see you.